Welcome to the Red Dirt Agronomy Podcast. My name is Dave Deacon. It's episode 107, and thank you for making your way back yet again. Do us a quick favor and go ahead and hit the subscribe button on your streaming service so you will be the first to know when a new Red Dirt Agronomy Podcast drops. We are coming to you from Dr. Jason Warren's research lab on the agronomy farm at Oklahoma State University. And as you can see from the Red Dirt Ag Twitter page, we really do the podcast where the soil samples become science. In this episode, we are talking prairie grasses, soils, and the occasional bird identification with Oklahoma State University Extension Rangeland ecology specialist, Dr. Laura Goodman. She will be throwing out some websites during the podcast, so to build your cheat sheet, go ahead and head over to reddirtagronomy.com, and we have links to all of them to help you pass your test at the end of the episode. Since we have not mastered the art of putting name graphics on audio files yet, we need to make a quick trip around the table so you know who to heckle when you see them at the next OSU Extension meeting. We'll start with a guy who is as well known for his work in herpetology as for his contributions to the world of soil fertility.
When you see a line of dead turtles trying to escape, it leaves an impact.
That, my friend, is Oklahoma State University Extension Precision Nutrient Management Specialist, Dr. Brian Arnell. And to his right is a guy who has devoted his life to thumbing through Oklahoma's terra firma.
You see a bird with just one leg, you're going to watch it.
Those are the golden tones of Oklahoma State University Extension Soil and Water Conservation Management Specialist and a lover of all things that fly, Dr. Jason Warren. And across from Jason is a man we learn a little more about every episode of the podcast, Oklahoma State University Extension Cropping System Specialist,
The grackles in Walmart parking lot. They're like half pirates.
Dr. Josh Lofton. If you would like to ask the group a question, then jump over to reddirtagronomy.com and leave a question there, or send us an email directly, podcast@reddirtagronomy.com, and we will discuss your questions on the podcast. Let's start out with a summer crop update with Dr. Josh Lofton. We do need to remind you this was before portions of the Southern Great Plains got the latest drink of water, and some places did get up to 5 inches in just a few days. You are listening to the Red Dirt Agronomy Podcast.
I mean, it really just depends on where you are. The rains, at least in the central and eastern part of the state, the last couple of weeks have really helped, put a lot of things in the ground. And then even where folks aren't getting a whole lot of rain, it's getting to be that time that you're going to have to start putting things in. So I've seen a lot of summer crops go in over the last couple of weeks, and I expect the next couple of weeks will be about the same. I think the big decisions that a lot of folks will be making is with their double crop. Everybody keeping a lot of their wheat acres. We thought double crop was going to be really high, but we really haven't gotten the rain to kind of sustain a true double crop system. So our double crop acres could be really high in the next couple weeks, or could be exceptionally low. So I think the rainfall, Brian, what do you think the rainfall next couple weeks is going to really dictate those acres?
I mean, it's going to dictate. We look at eastern Oklahoma, not a lot of soybeans gone in there yet because of too much rain. So if they can get a dry period, they're going to roll hard. We're talking before a weekend, supposed to have some rain. So if that were to come fruition and we get that, the next couple days after that, there's going to be a lot going in. I was going to ask you, as you look at the timing, we're mid-May right now at the time of this recording, nearly, getting into late May. Where are you transitioning? Are you at any point transitioning what crop you're thinking about just due to the time period we're in, transitioning from soy to sorghum, sorghum to soy, and then at what point do you say that, I'm in a double crop, I might try a double crop corn, or at what point is it double crop?
Well, I mean, on your crop situation, I don't think calendar dictates what crop you should grow, at least right now. I think it should be like, we've gotten a lot of good rain, we haven't been able to get in. I think soy is still your best option there. So you're talking about like I-35 East, where they've gotten a lot of the rain to where they haven't gotten their crop in because it's been too wet. I think soy is a great option there because they're going to have good, deep soil moisture. They've gotten some moisture over the winter and stuff like that. The folks out west, I don't know if it's like a, hey, it's time to switch from soybean to sorghum. I think it's we don't have the deep soil moisture to sustain a soybean crop later into the year. So sorghum, cotton, sesame might be my better option. I don't think calendar day changes that. And the same thing with calling it double crop or full season. I think that's just semantics at this point in time. We have a lot of people that go in that don't plant any soybean until June, and they still call it double crop because that's when double crop goes in. Well, it's full season technically, but you manage it the same as you would a double crop. And I think we need to start shifting towards those thought processes of managing double crop. So we're talking about, increasing seeding rates, maybe shortening row widths and stuff like that we typically would do in that double crop, because we are getting towards June, and we're running out of even though it's kind of odd to think about it in that it's 100 degrees, but we only have a limited amount of heat units we would expect in a year, and we're starting to get at that time of the year that we're starting to get limited on those.
I'm also going to say, based upon the wheat crop I've seen, we're turning fast. We're turning really, really fast. The station here on the agronomy farm this weekend, we were green. We weren't looking and driving by this afternoon out here 5 days later, we've turned. We've started senescence. We're browning off, and so, normally I would look at going to my Altus harvest in another week or so. I've already seen reports that wheat's coming in that southwest. If there's wheat down there, we might be cutting wheat early. So that means we could be in the ground with a seed crop even earlier than normal. So you could have wheat out by the first week of June.
Well, in our situation, it's turning not because it's drying out, it's because it's just hot.
Well, yeah.
And so there's some folks that it's turning because it's dying, because it's drying out, and then there's some folks like us that it's we've been blessed with quite a bit of rain the last couple weeks, and so it's not drying out. It's the fact that it's nearly 100 degrees the last 2 weeks. So that bodes well, hopefully, for double crop, because that doesn't mean that the moisture's running out. It just means that the wheat might come out a little bit early. So then I don't have to roll the dice within 10 days to plant a double crop.
Jason, do you have any thoughts on residue management, wheat double crop, as far as, if there's value of the stripper, cutting high, cutting low when it comes into that straw management?
I don't know. This year I'd want as much residue as I can get, and it's a tall. But we're not going to have a problem with too tall because the wheat's all short. Mm-hmm. Even the good wheat around here doesn't seem to be very tall. But as far as, I don't know, I like stripper headers. You can roll through some wheat. I'm a little surprised they never really took off that much, and I'm not sure why. Maybe it's the cost relative to the fact that, they're really made to be highly useful when you're rolling through really heavy 100-bushel wheat. But I like the residue if you can cut through it. The only time I've ever seen anybody have problems with it is in canola, but we're not doing that. Right.
Oh, some are.
Well,
it's a good price.
I'm not talking
about,
we're not planting it right now is what I'm saying.
No. We're but that's
as far as soybeans, planting soybeans into tall straw, which
I like strippers into double crop. It's like you said, it's that next year to where the wheat might fall over and lay over and stuff like that, to where I've heard a lot of folks kind of don't like the stripper. But going to double crop is awesome.
So Josh, with that, is this going to benefit the folks that are going from wheat to cotton? Because in years past, the wheat crop has kind of held on a little longer. They haven't been able to get the wheat out, and then it kind of pushed back planting dates for cotton. Is this potential early, air quotes, harvest with wheat? Is that going to help those cotton producers that are thinking about going in after?
I'll default to the two here at the table that have actually grown cotton in this state. I think it would, because the more heat units you have, the better for cotton. But these two are the ones that have done cotton before.
I wouldn't tend to think you could double crop cotton, but you can roll the dice on whatever you want.
Well, so
I mean, there's guys that double cropping cotton in quotations after failed wheat. They got 5-bushel wheat, they're burning it down and planting cotton. But this is right now is when you need to be planting cotton. I would think most of the state.
Well, so
not early.
I guess
early
that's
up north, and then you can get a couple weeks down south.
If you talk the Red River, though, combines can be often running this time of the year anyway. So
down along the Red River,
if you get cotton in by the 1st of June down there.
But I guess that's the other thing, is that let's not even talk about double crop. Let's talk about the people that haven't planted.
Right.
When do you think's the last day that you would go in with a cotton crop? Kind of going back to Brian's question, because I talked about it, soybean, sorghum, and all that. When would you do that on
what's
cotton?
The insurance date?
Yeah.
That's going to be the question right now, is that that southwest district, some got cotton in, drying it out. I mean, right now, half of that area is probably looking at dusting it in if there's no moisture coming in. And so it's getting in the ground before the insurance date on a full season at this point in time.
Yeah.
And probably waiting as long as you can until you get to that point and hope for some moisture to come.
Yeah.
Well, and one thing on the moisture front, that's one thing that the folks at the Mesonet have been reiterating, that May, June, July are technically the wettest months in Oklahoma. So I mean,
well, and they posted a deal on Twitter the other day, saying that there's a bullseye in central Oklahoma with 3 to 4 inches of rain emanating out to an inch for. I mean, I just checked the weather app, and they're saying nearly an inch Monday and Tuesday in Keys.
Right.
That'll be unbelievable because they haven't had an inch of rain in God knows how long.
They don't even have gutters on the houses out there, do they?
They don't need them.
I didn't think so. They have solar panels, but no gutters.
They don't need gutters, except for the occasional turd floater.
There you go.
And they don't worry too much about that. They
Right.
just wash the house off after, I suppose.
There's that. Well, of course, you are. I want to go ahead and reiterate that, you're listening to the Red Dirt Agronomy podcast, because whenever that goes viral, I want people to know where they heard it.
Yeah.
So really, that's kind of where we are with the summer crops. The wheat crop it's done. I mean, we are where we are with that, and any amount of moisture is not going to help that crop. But if we do continue to get the rains, what does that mean for the summer crop soil nutrients there?
It would be that you might invest in it. Right now, I'm not investing in it a whole lot. I had actually an in-service the other day, and discussion was, do I fertilize a Bermuda grass out in western Oklahoma, or do I cut it half rate? And I thought half rate was a little aggressive, because at this point, you have no subsoil moisture underneath it. It's got a little bit of moisture on top of it. Then you pour nitrogen to a Bermuda grass, which is going to want to just luxury consume and blow up. And if you got nothing there to keep it going, you could actually go inverse. So same thing. It's a lot of it's a wait and see game on the fertility. I know a lot of folks that have already put it down for their corn or their sorghum. But I would caution on the short side on sorghum, short side on cotton. You're probably going to have root exploration anyway, so let it chase some of the fertility and just see if we get some moisture. And if we don't get the moisture, you didn't need it, and it doesn't matter anyways.
Man, what an uplifting podcast, huh?
Yeah.
I mean, that's where we are right now, and the old saying, "Pray for rain and don't complain about the mud." Well, maybe someday we'll be there. We'll see. And of course, today we have a special guest. This has worked out pretty good. We've had some great special guests, and Dr. Laura Goodman with us today. Now, Laura, tell us what your official title is, because I am the world's worst at butchering titles. Brian can tell you that.
So I'm an associate professor, and I'm the range extension specialist for the state.
Oh, cool. Okay. And we've there was a day I interviewed you quite a bit on the TV side of it. Kind of talk about what you do with your in the field studies.
So a project that we're working on right now that we've had since 2019 is called the Prairie Project. And that project is a collaboration between Texas A&M, UNL in Nebraska, and OSU. And we're working on trying to find approaches to economically control woody plants in these states that were historically, dominated by prairies. And so we know that there's some different approaches that can help maintain productivity or sometimes even increase productivity. That's difficult to do on rangelands. There's not really a lot of options for ways to try to increase productivity of our native grasses and stuff. And so one of those is using prescribed fire. We know that we can increase productivity, biomass production of our major forage grasses with prescribed fire. But the main benefit is really the controlling the plants that are trying to take over prairies. And so, the main culprit is eastern red cedar here, and in Nebraska and Kansas, and then in Texas we have red-berry juniper or pinchote juniper, and then ash juniper, blueberry juniper, and they're all getting places where they weren't. And so prescribed fire was kind of the old standby, but we are adding multi-species grazing to that mix, and so we're trying to increase total animal productivity off of the land, and by adding goats to the mix, we can increase the total productivity. Folks tend to try to push their stocking rate with cattle, and to try to make it profitable or to make their payment if they have a loan on that land. And it's long term usually the worst decision, because it ends up decreasing the production in those pastures. So how can you add more animals but do it sustainably? You add another species that's going to eat different plants. And so the goats tend to eat more browse. They eat woody plants. They eat that's the predominant plant group that makes up their diet, and that's the predominant group that's taking over our pastures and limiting our grass growth. So that's what we're working on. We're adding goats to the mix, and we've had them out at the research station now for a couple years, and we've added them on top of the existing stocking rate that we had with our cattle, and it's working great. They make a good amount of money, those little goats.
So, Laura, I'm going to assume that if you look at just beef alone, is there a correlation between stocking rate and the invasion rate of the woody species?
Yeah. So the main culprits for increased woody plant invasion, so for sure not having fire as frequently as normal. So in Oklahoma, the historic fire return interval was every 3 to 5, 6, 7 years, depending on how far west. Out in the Panhandle, it'll be more like every 10 years. So the reduction of fire, increased CO2 in the atmosphere, we know benefits plants that have C3 photosynthetic pathways. So almost all woodies are that. Our grasses are C4, warm season plants, and then heavy grazing use of the grasses benefits woody plant invasion. So those are all kind of things that have got us to this point where this is a struggle for almost every rancher in the state, that they've got woody plants that are coming in and they're trying to manage them, and it's so expensive. So yes, definitely. I don't know.
Josh looked like or Jason looked like he was warming up for I mean, he even set up and everything for the question. That's why we were focusing in on you.
Well, and so like if you have a pasture and you just don't graze it, would those like cedar would invade?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's kind of what I've observed.
They're not going to invade as quickly, likely. There's going to be more competition for them for resources, and some of those species don't like to compete for sunlight, especially as a seedling. They can't do it very well. So it might not happen at the same rate as if you had a lot of grazing happening, but they will, especially cedar. I mean, it will invade regardless. But the other thing is, if you're trying to use fire to control those plants, you have to be managing your fuel, and the fuel is the grass. So if you're grazing heavily, you can't burn. And so how do you do those in the same pasture? That's why we do patch burn grazing, where we're just burning a portion of the pasture. By burning just a chunk of the pasture but allowing animals access to all of it year-round, they concentrate on the burn because it's really palatable. And then they ignore other areas, and so you accumulate a lot of fuel in the unburned areas. And then when you do burn them, you can kill bigger trees.
So with that, it seems like every spring, you can drive along Highway 60 up there in Osage County, and all the ranchers are burning. Is that an annual thing, or do they kind of, say we're going to burn these 2 pastures this year and then we're going to rotate through, or is it just we're just going to start over every year? And are there benefits to that?
Yeah. So it varies by rancher, but the majority of the ranchers in Osage County burn annually, and that's what happens over most of the Flint Hills that go up into Kansas. And so when you burn annually, you're pushing the system to a really heavily grass-dominated system, which is great for cattle. And especially if you're grazing yearlings or stocker cattle during the growing season on native pasture, if you burn in March, April, you're setting them up to have the highest plane of nutrition during the summer that they can have, especially for those, kind of till July. Then in July, usually they start to kind of experience a summer slump. So in some cases, people are supplementing those stockers, or in some places, what we do at the research station here is we have patch burns that we burn in February, March, and then we have another patch that we burn in August to provide high quality forage. That doesn't work great for stockers, but if you have a cow-calf herd, that is going to provide the best forage kind of year round with the least amount of supplement needed. So Osage County, there's a lot of annual burning. That's great for cattle production. It has caused some issues with erosion just from doing it. People have been doing it for 30 years in some places. So that has led to some erosion, and also just if you have other uses that you want for that land, like you're trying to provide some wildlife habitat, you aren't doing it well with the annual burn. There's just not very much variability. So there's not very many broadleaf plants. The shrubs are almost completely gone from most of those systems. So if you wanted quail, if you wanted or prairie chickens, if you wanted some of these other animals that need those types of plants and structure, they're not available when you burn annually.
So it's just grass. That's
grass,
what they need for cattle production, and then wildlife is not necessarily going to be attracted to that.
Yeah, most wildlife.
Usually,
yeah. There's few species that like that, but not very many. So if you try this patch burning, you're providing the high quality forage, but you're also providing variation in the structure, so the plant heights and the maturity of the plant, how old it is, all of those different things across the area. And so you don't lose that benefit to the livestock, but you gain the benefit for lots of other species. And cattle, they are going to select those locations. We put GPS collars on them, and we've done this in lots of different locations across the state, and it's just time and time again they're selecting heavily for those burned areas. Actually, we had a research project that we've just wrapped up down at south of Clinton at near Bessie at Clemmy, and we had a student. She did such a cool project. So we had her put GPS collars in year one and track where the cattle were. And then we took that GPS data and looked at where the cattle were ignoring across the pasture. And we made our fire, we just selected the ignored locations for our burn units. And then we burned them the next year. We burned some in the spring and some later in the summer and end of June. And looked at how much we could change behavior, and drastically changed the grazing behavior across those pastures. So, even if you didn't want to do it necessarily how we've done it, where you just are always burning the same patches every 3 years, you could do something where if you had a location that was not being used because it's further away from water, or it's in a steeper area, or whatever the reason that they don't want to use it, if you burn that location, you can usually drastically change how the animals use those pastures.
So Laura, if you're looking at introducing goats into the grazing system,
mm-hmm.
and in that same Clinton-Bessie area, west dry, however you want to say it,
yeah,
how do you manage the stocking rate? What's the right
mm-hmm.
cattle stocking rate? What's the right goat rate? And then
mm-hmm.
how do you deal with the environmental variance of rainfall and forage production from year to year?
So if you're adding goats to the existing cattle, as long as you are grazing your cattle sustainably, you could add goats on top of that. And there's some calculations you can do if you have some idea of how much overlap you think there's going to be, but almost nobody knows that. So the kind of old rule of thumb with goats is you can add 2 goats for every cow if you're grazing, for every, if it's a cow-calf herd, for every cow. In that part of the state, we, depending on, the pastures vary quite a bit on productivity depending on soils you know. And so I've, for a 1,200-pound cow, I've calculated stocking rates where it's 1 cow to 15 acres. I've calculated some areas that it's 1 to 20. Some locations it's more, takes more acres than that to support a cow, and that's for year round. So it'd be different if you were grazing for 6 months with steers or something, something smaller. But those are kind of, ballpark 1 to 20. I would say 1 to 20 or 1 to 25 is what I've calculated for most of those locations. There's a really excellent tool that's online that folks can use if they're really just haven't ever done a stocking rate calculator, calculation. It's called the Rangeland analysis platform, and it actually is using satellite imagery and giving an estimate of productivity for a specific pasture. So you'd outline your specific pasture, and it gives an estimate using that remote sense data. And it's been, it's created using a model that had all this data that was collected from lots of locations. And so it's been validated, but it does the calculations. So you just have the outline of the area. It knows what the productivity is. You can put in, I'm going to graze 1,100-pound cows, or I'm going to graze 700-pound steers or whatever, and I want to graze them for this long, and it'll tell you how many it could carry. And it will actually go back in time and say, in 1985, you should have grazed this many. In 1991, you should have grazed this many. And so you can see it'll give you a long-term average of kind of what that pasture could carry through time.
How do I find that?
Yeah, if you just Google Rangeland analysis platform, you can find it online, and it's just a website with a calculator on it. And it just generates a report. It's really slick. And, most of the time in the past, we were telling folks if they hadn't ever, if you purchase a new property, use the web soil survey production estimates. But that's not as there's no calculator to do the math for you. But on the Rangeland analysis platform, there is. So.
I wish I'd known this 2 weeks ago. I had a guy call and want to know what stocking rate for a quarter he's thinking about buying in Payne County. He's like, I don't know.
Now everybody on the podcast knows.
Everyone knows.
Now the dozens know.
Yeah,
Dozens of dozens.
I want to bring us back to this patch burn deal. So if I'm a guy or a lady or whatever, and I've got 160 acres out in western Oklahoma somewhere.
Sayer.
We can use Sayer.
Sayer, why not?
So how do I get started on this
patch? Got some weeping love grass and Sayer.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
But so how do I get started? I've got this pasture and I want to patch burn graze it.
Yeah.
How do I select where the first patch is going to be? And then, what do I do to keep, from the country from burning on fire?
Yeah.
Do what?
How many acres do you need to patch burn? I mean,
there's no real rules. They've before I came to OSU, there was quite a bit of research looking at how many patches do I need, how big do the patches need to be, and the long and short of it is it doesn't really matter. It's going to attract the animals regardless. If you have, depending on how frequently you want to burn, if you want a 3-year fire return interval, and you want to burn once a year, then you divide the pasture into 3 patches. And then you'll burn 1 patch 1 year, 1 patch the next year, and the next patch in the 3rd year. And then you'll come back around. So the whole thing's being burned every 3 years. In a pasture where there's never been any burning happening before, I would pick my patches. They wouldn't have to be the same size. I would pick my patches based on what natural fire breaks I already have. And you could amplify those. So if you have ranch roads, if you have a creek or an arroyo or something that, or a canyon, whatever you've got running through that pasture that's just dirt, you can use those as fire breaks, and then you can mow off of those and wet them right before you light. So you just try to pick based on what you have available. Make it as simple as possible. So if you have a ranch road, then you can just mow the vegetation along those ranch roads to make them even wider, and then wet it right before. If it was bordering a neighbor's, then I would go for a little bit more, mineral fire break. So down to the dirt. So come in and doze it.
Yeah.
So you don't have any chance of it. And then burning under safe conditions is for sure the best way to make sure it doesn't go everywhere. The safest time of year is actually summer to burn because everything's green and has a lot of water in it.
Yeah.
So you're burning the dormant, dead vegetation from the year previous to actually even get the green stuff to burn. But if you burn, so then we're always trying to burn when wind speeds are less than 15. In the summer, sometimes people will burn when wind speeds are 15 to 20, but I wouldn't recommend that for an inexperienced burner. Mm-hmm. And then just looking for days that your humidity is not going to get super low. So you're trying to make sure the humidity is above 40 or 50%.
Yeah.
Depends on if it's in the summer or in the winter, what you need, but.
Do you worry much about if you've never done it? Do you really worry about whether you're doing a fall, summer, spring burn, or just find an opportunity?
Yeah, I think just making the burn happen is the number one thing. Once you get going with patch burning, it actually makes the burning easier because then the next unit you can burn towards the other burned patch.
That's what because it's gonna have pretty low fuel load.
Yep. And then the animals are going to switch to the newest burn, and they'll leave that other one alone. And so it makes the burning fairly simple. But yeah, I think when you start to kind of finesse the burn season, if you're wanting to have the best forage available for livestock, then a dormant season burn's probably your go-to. If you're wanting to kill as many woody plants as possible, then summer burns are typically better at that.
Our summer burns, isn't that kind of hard to get all that stuff? I mean, you say it's all greens full of water. Isn't it kind of hard to get the grass to burn in the summertime? Unless you're in a real dry condition anyway, like August or something.
Didn't have dormant vegetation, if you don't have a bunch of if you have a bunch of little blue stem that grew, like my neighbor, he has a lot of little blue stem from last year's, all over his pasture still, so all that will burn well. But that's really what's carrying the burn. And then you can't, you've got to usually do it later in the day. In the summer you can't do it first thing if there's a heavy dew. There's just different things, but it's usually there's a lot of steam in a summer burn because of all that water, and it burns very slowly. So, you got to make sure you're bringing enough water for people to drink. You're going to be using less water on the fire and more water for people because it's hot.
Do you get as good a kill on the herbaceous species and the woody species when you do the summer burns? Yeah,
there's some, there was some really cool research with extreme fires in Texas in the summer. The more when those plants when the temperature is higher, and especially if those plants are a little drought stressed, you get a better kill. Now, most of the plants in Oklahoma, they're going to just top kill them. They're going to resprout, except for eastern red cedar.
That's what I was going to ask. Is like what all like woody species can we? Mm-hmm. Most of them, you're saying we're just going to push them back a little?
Yeah, we're going to knock them back. So you're just changing the competition between the grasses and the woody plants. So, you'll see this a lot with blackberry, where you've got these thick blackberry motts, and so when we burn through them, it doesn't even burn. It doesn't even burn the middle of the mott, but it'll burn the outside of the mott. And then you'll have a little bit more grass. That mott will just start to shrink a little bit. There'll be more grass around the edge, and every year it'll just shrink up a little bit more and a little bit more, depending on how frequently you're burning and stuff. But yeah, most of our species, so like all the oaks, like post oak especially. Post oak is so fire adapted. It doesn't even have to be that old as a seedling to really get around fire because it's just a tough plant. But so, post oak, blackjack oak, honey locust, black locust, hackberry, almost all of our trees they're almost all resprouting, and they weren't everywhere historically because they were killed by fire when they were young because it was happening so often.
Yeah.
But so the oaks, there's not as much evidence that the oaks are really spreading from where they were. It's the cedar trees that are, and they are not fire tolerant. So once they burn, they're dead. If the whole plant really burns.
What's the original range of the eastern red cedar? Where did that come from?
Well, it was here, but it was only really, it was living in locations that had, that were rocky, that had shallow soils that wouldn't carry a fire.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then as we stopped having as much fire, it just moved out from there.
Yeah.
So it was always here, and we get conversations about, well, isn't it native? And yeah, it's native, but even though a plant's native, it doesn't mean that it necessarily lived in all the locations it does now. And we know that there's a lot of impacts from eastern red cedar on the water, how much water is getting to our streams and our creeks, how much water is infiltrating into the soil in some of our locations.
Those numbers
and
always
stuff.
blew me away. Can you kind of share some of those numbers about water? Do you remember those off the top of your head?
Yeah.
Because the water use was huge. Every time
Oh, yeah.
I'd hear about it, just massive water use.
Yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head, but one thing that comes up a lot in discussions is, well, we're trying to capture and get as much infiltration on our pastures as possible, and that's true. But we also want some surface flow, right? We want some water feeding our stock tanks, feeding our streams, all of those things. And cedar trees here limit both of those. They're limiting. There's enough interception that's happening that it's limiting how much is infiltrating into any given location, but it's also changing how much is making it to our streams. And so you'll hear people talk about when they cut all the cedars off their place that, oh my gosh, this stream that was dry is now running. And that's legitimate. I mean, we've done watershed studies, and we know that can happen. And even if it was flowing at one point or is flowing a little bit, you can increase the amount that's flowing. And so it has a big impact. And so that's one negative, but there's also negatives to lots of different wildlife species. So
it actually was kind of cool. So we bought 70 acres, and 35 of it will be forage. The other 35 we're going to run cattle on. And so we just finished, I say just, about a month ago, we finished pushing over half of the cedar trees. Well, all of the cedar trees on one pasture, and just, made big piles of cedar trees. We got that 3.5-inch rain a couple weeks ago, and I put the drone up, and I flew over it, and I took pictures of this stream that is now flowing again because there's no cedars out there to, dampen the flow. And I showed my wife that, and she said, "You're really excited about that." And I said, "I really am. I mean, just to be able to see that little creek that's forming, through the pasture there." Yeah. And it's funny because everything that Jason was asking, I was going through my mind. I was like, "Well, I have a question about that." Oh, okay. About, the eastern red cedars, and then the other smaller, plants that there are trees and such that may be growing up now. On that pasture, we're starting to have some sumac, and we're starting to have some other smaller plants growing there. Is it worth going over it with a brush hog, trying to just kill the plants and then burning it? Does that even make a difference? It save me some diesel. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah. So the plan is to also burn?
Yes.
Okay. So I mean, you may get, if you brush hogged them and then you waited to get some grass response in there, you may get a better burn through those locations, especially when you have like pretty thick, dense mottes or clumps of those plants. Sumac Sumac's a tougher one because it really loves fire. So even when you have fire, it tends to kind of increase. And we see this a lot in places where there's been a wildfire and we've killed a lot of cedars, that one of the first things that comes back is sumac. This happened after the Ray of Fire for sure in some locations, that there's just so much sumac now. And so that's a tougher one. And that's actually one of the reasons that we added goats to the mix, because goats don't care if sumac's burned or not, but they love to strip the bark. And we're having patches in our pastures that we're starting to have a hard time locating where we're going to put our next sumac exclosures, because the goats are enjoying it. And so especially in the winter they love to strip the barking. It's all resprouting. It's not going to be gone forever, but they strip the bark off of the really big sumac especially, and so those mott's are starting to grow more grass in them. Well, I think that visually I'm seeing that. We'll see what the data says, but and so then the burn's going to be burning through there and cooking it a bit more. And so we're just trying to change the dynamics of these relationships between the plants, basically, and besides that, it's a great quality forage for the goats. We're trying to figure out, why are the goats so focused on the bark? And I couldn't find anybody who had ever analyzed sumac bark, and I was like, I guess we're going to have to do that. But evidently, there's some different species of trees where the vitamins and minerals in bark is really high, and so that might be what's going on, especially in the winter. But
so let's play a game. Or not a game. Help me with this.
Let's play Monopoly.
Let's play this. So, let's say I'm out in Western Oklahoma, Clinton, or whatever, or Sayre. Sorry, Sayre. And I buy a couple quarters that Jason had owned and basically grazed the piss out of. And it's nothing but eastern red cedar and no biomass, because my stocking rate was 1 cow per 5 acres, and it should have been 1 per 25. Not that would ever happen in the state of Oklahoma, mind you, but pretending I just bought property that's been overgrazed, mismanaged.
Yeah.
What's the protocol for that? What's next?
Yeah. So, ideally you would probably defer grazing, and hopefully you'd have a really great growing season. So in Oklahoma, almost all of our grasses grow during the summer. So they start in about April, and then they're really cranking in May and June. Those are the months where we get the majority of our plant growth in our native rangeland pastures. So ideally you'd have a really great year and they'd be able to recover really well. If, depending on how that use had been for long term, you might not get those grasses coming back for a couple years. And so in that case, you could ideally you would defer grazing as long as possible till you really saw some of the dominant forage grasses. So, when I'm talking about forage grasses in Oklahoma, in that part of the state, we have more mixed species. So we've got buffalo grass and blue grama and side oats grama, and but we also have little blue stem and big blue stem and all of the really, the big productive ones would be big blue stem, little blue stem, side or switchgrass and Indian grass. But you're going to want to make sure that they're growing. If you don't have any of those, then all that your animals are going to be eating in there is broadleaf plants, which broadleaf plants are fine. A lot of them are really high quality, but a lot of them are also defended chemically from grazing, especially by cattle. Cattle don't handle secondary compounds in plants, and so they make them sick. So you'd want to defer grazing. You'd want to set the right stocking rate and go from there. If it had a bunch of woody plants, I'd start with goats, but depends on, the biggest issue for goats for a lot of people is the infrastructure getting going. Yeah. We work with ranchers across the state that have added goats to their properties, and some of them are successfully doing it with 9 or 10 strands of barbed wire, and that's been the cheapest approach for them. instead
That's
of.
what I was going to ask is about keeping the fences and all that, and what the cost of that would be.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to get the cost. People kind of figure it out, but.
Yeah, so I don't know now. I know what we paid for our fence. We did not buy the cheapest fence for our research pastures. We have Stay Tough fence, and it has 3-inch vertical stays, and that fence is expensive, not because just for the material, but also for being put up, and you have to put in additional H braces and T-posts because it's heavy and not necessary really, for most folks. The big thing is if you've got goats packed in there and overstocked, they're gonna try to find a way to get out. I mean, they tend to be more mischievous than any other livestock anyway, but especially if they're hungry. So, but then so some folks are using that 9 or 10 strands of barbed wire. You add the additional strands close to the ground. That's where you need them. The fence doesn't really keep the predators out, so you do have to have some good predator protection, and so we use guard dogs, livestock guardian dogs. And I think that's worked really well for us. We tried donkeys; they didn't work in our situation, but some folks have luck with them.
I mean, have you guys looked at the return on investment on that? I mean, because I've talked to people, and it's kind of amazing what you can sell a goat for.
Oh, so the 5-year. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, but can the addition of those goats, because you're running goats with very little impact on your cattle capacity or carrying capacity. I mean, how long does it take to pay for all that?
So we're working on that. So the goats that we added, we only have 60 goats. There are 20 goats in each of our research pastures, and the idea was that we were going to add just a handful of goats to each cattle pasture. They're 120-acre pastures, and so we weren't doing like a targeted grazing project where we were like loading as many goats in there for a short period of time as possible. It was like if somebody was just to go to the sale barn, get a handful of goats, and add them to their cattle pasture, what would happen? So we bought 60 nannies, or does. We bought 4 bucks, and then we bought donkeys, and then ended up switching and buying guard dogs. And after our first kid crop, we made back 89% of the initial investment in all of those animals. Wow. So, yeah. And the dogs are $1,000 a pop.
So you're talking the animals, you're talking the goats and the guard dogs.
The goats, the donkeys, the guard dogs, And so, and the reason is those goats had like 1.5 kids per nanny per doe. Mm-hmm. So, they're producing more than themselves for sure. And then the weight, the percent of weight. So one of the efficiency metrics that we look at for cattle, right, is what percent of the mature cow's weight is she weaning every year? Well, it's, if you've got 50, 60, that's awesome. Well, a goat will wean 70% of her weight. For these goats, it was their first kid crop. So most of them this is the first time they ever had a kid. And we lost some kids. We think we lost 12 or 13 total. But we still ended up making, we sold the bucklings. They were 50-something pounds. We sold them for $2.99 a pound.
Wow.
Is it Perkins? I can't remember. And then the doelings we sold for $240 a head, I think was what we sold them for. And they were, 50-something pounds.
So you don't even how old of an animal is that? You're not...
5 months.
So you're keeping the kids...
Was it even 5? Yeah, I think
for 5 months.
4 or 5 months.
Yeah.
100 days. I think there were 100 days. So no, so like,
and you're still running cattle on it, huh?
Yeah, and they're heifers that they're doing the heifer development for a bunch of the different research stations on our patchburn pastures. So,
what's that stocking rate on those heifers? Do you remember?
There's 10 heifers on the 120 acres.
How here's gonna switch a little over to the wildlife stuff. So when we're running these goats out there,
Mm-hmm.
are they? You know, we're running cattle, and we're just gonna start running goats. I mean, how does that the presence of the goat? How's that going to influence like deer populations and different things like that? Is it gonna be beneficial, or is there no impact, or does anybody really know?
So deer is probably the most complicated because deer and goats have a lot of overlap in diet.
That's why I wondered about that. I thought so, but I'm not a...
Yeah, so they have a lot of overlap. But for there to be competition between two species, there has to be a limited resource. And in Oklahoma, there's less limited resources for deer than any prairie species by far.
Yeah, they're like rats. You know, I mean, some years their populations will just be so thick. It's
they're fairly generalist species. The issue for them in Oklahoma is the areas that are completely closed canopy forests have almost no vegetation that's accessible at ground level. Yeah. It's just it's I mean, when you actually go out there and measure what's accessible, it's almost like you're in the desert for them because everything's way up high. Yeah. So closed canopy forest is not ideal.
Yeah.
But there's a lot less limiting resources for them than there are for like, you know, all of our prairie species. So meadowlark, scissortail. I mean, we might not have scissortail here in the future, which would be so sad for Oklahoma.
Yeah, that's the state bird.
Yeah,
because they like prairies. You know, there's a lot of these species that they won't live where there's a forest. So people are like, well, I see birds in these plants all the time. Well, there's different species. There's generalist bird species too, but there's bird species that like forests. There's bird species that like prairies, and the bird species that like prairies are more endangered than any other birds in the world. So because there's not very many prairies left.
Open, large prairie areas, yeah. It's kind of, I mean, it's kind of interesting because I've looked at some of the history of like deforestation that happened, you know, at the beginning of settlement on the East Coast and went through to the West Coast, and then now we have essentially woody species invasion that's probably equally problematic, right?
Yeah.
Just in a different way, and it's striking. Like, tell us a little bit about this pear tree. You and I have had, I mean, and I want you to talk about the pear, and then I just want to go off and just make a few comments because it's unreal. Yeah. Tell us what I'm talking about.
So Bradford pears and Chanticleer pears, there's all these ornamental pears that were developed for people to plant in their yards, and they have lots of pretty flowers in April, lots of white flowers in April, and they were bred to be sterile, and they are sterile to themselves, but they cross with each other. So then
that sounds like a disaster.
Yeah. So they're spreading into all of these areas. So especially around towns and stuff where people have planted them heavily, they're spreading into any land adjacent. So if you have pastures that are adjacent to any of the major cities or even small towns in Oklahoma where people have planted them, they're getting into pastures and stuff and spreading really rapidly. So we there's a site here near Stillwater where we were looking back in Google Earth, and we couldn't find any pear trees 7 years previous, and it only took 7 years for it to really take over a pasture. That pasture was taken over by cedar and pear at the same time, and so they're white flowering. There's lots of white flowering things, but they grow in crazy densities. So if you see just tons of stuff that's white and flowering in April, and it has really upright branches, it's probably a pear.
It smells horrible.
And they smell horrible. Yeah, so I get contacted by folks all over the East Coast that are like, it's really bad here.
Well,
like,
that's what
y'all are at the tip of the iceberg compared to what we have
you
going
ain't seen
on.
Nothing yet.
Yeah.
Well, I think your predecessor mentioned this to me years ago, and ever since then I've noticed it. And around Stillwater, it's prolific.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got
Yes.
fields. I remember when 20 years ago when I was in school, they were grass
Yeah.
along Cow Creek, and now it's a solid stand of these damn trees. And then when you drive from here to Miami in April, they're everywhere.
Yeah.
And then this year, I drove from here to Ohio, Columbus, Ohio, and they were all along the way. And just like you say, you drive, and you'll see a house with a big, 30, 40-foot tall pear tree, a big one, which we don't get them here that big because the branches break out of them for whatever reason. We cut them down and plant a new one. But there were these big trees, and I was telling my students about this. It's like, yeah, see that in the yard, and then you look over here in the fence line, and they're lining the fence line, or out in the pasture.
Yeah.
And I just wonder, like, how far west could they go? Or are they really from here east type of issue just because of their biology?
That's a really great question. There's actually, so what's funny is like everybody knows that they're a problem and that there's nothing growing under them, but there's very little research that's been done on the impacts of them.
Like if we care at all about like
I know
wildlife or pasture management, I guess we just go chop them down and squirt some Tordon on the stump or what?
Yeah, so you bring up a good point. You can't kill them like easily.
You can't kill them with fire, right?
No. Not unless they're teeny. But yeah, you're going to have to do a cut stump. You could do basil bark because they're really thin barked, and so you can use basil bark treatments on them too.
Is that where you just squirt like?
Yeah, so there's different options, but I like, so you can do triclopyr, you can do imazapyr. There's some different, depends on if you're doing a basil bark or a hack and squirt. The problem is all of it is really labor intensive. Hack and squirt. Hack and squirt. Yep. You still
Don't
take your
Google
little
that.
hatchet. Oh no. Oh god.
Anyway, but you were saying.
But they're all labor intensive,
Yeah.
right? And then it just takes a lot of work to get these things
because
killed.
even if you mow them, I mean, like, or if you go in there and bulldoze them, they'll grow back from the roots, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're a prolific. I mean, that's a.
If you could get the base of the plant out, then they wouldn't. But otherwise, they'll come back. Yeah. But
because I've always. I don't know. My wife years ago, she's like, "Oh, I just want one of those pear trees. Oh, I just love them. I think they're so pretty." And I'm like, "I'm not planting a pear tree." And the main
that is not what you said.
No, I did.
That is a spot-on daisy, by the way.
Yeah, but I the reason I didn't want to plant one is because every time in Oklahoma you see one and half of it's blown out. And then
they don't do storms.
Yeah,
well,
they don't like it.
And we have lots of those.
Yeah, but now like there's a good reason, like because. And so, because you've told me before about like trying to get people to not plant them, to start planting more native plants.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit. First, tell us a little bit about our alternatives to it, and then secondly, do you think we're too far gone? I mean, is there not a sufficient population in the wild that they're going to just explode and just keep moving through our forested areas?
Yeah, they're going to keep moving through the forest. I mean, especially like when you go over to Tulsa and stuff, it's pretty bad over there. But as further out west, it's not. And even around parts of Payne County don't have a lot of it in some natural. Some
the Johnson grass chokes them out.
I just think there hasn't been a seed source in some spots, But there are people that plant them all along their drive up to their house out in the country and stuff too. So, but Mexican plum is an awesome alternative. It's not a huge tree, but it smells awesome. Flowers at the same time. Also white flowers. Yeah. Tons of critters love it, and it's a beautiful tree. I think. The other thing, large flowering dogwood are awesome. They also smell good and they're really pretty.
Yeah.
So those are, and those grow native to Oklahoma.
What about just the old redbud, man?
Oh yeah, I love redbud.
I do too.
Yeah.
It's a state tree.
Yeah, it is. And a legume.
Is it a legume?
It's a legume.
No, isn't that crazy?
That doesn't even make sense.
I agree.
What was the second one you said? Large
Can
flowering?
we use that as a cover crop, Josh?
Dogwood.
Yeah.
We probably could.
I mean, the flowers are big.
What's the planting rate on that?
How many goats you got?
Yeah, I didn't realize that. I did
So
not realize.
are
that
they
Red
still
Rose was
selling,
good.
commercially selling pear trees?
Yes, all over the place. I think almost, yes. Lots of places are still selling them, unfortunately. So some towns have made it where, like, if you're putting in a commercial building, you can't. It's on a list of do not plant. You can't plant. They don't have any restrictions, I don't think, for like a homeowner to plant it. But like, if a
Walmart loves those freaking
Oh, yeah.
and
my gosh.
Grackles and
I don't mean to
Walmart
call
and
them out.
freaking pear
Grackles,
trees.
Grackles,
Grackles
and
love the-
pear trees.
The structure,
Yeah.
right? The Grackles love that
They
upright
must,
stem structure.
yeah.
And
Oh god! But it's like the parking lot tree of so many different companies, and so some cities like Tulsa is one that has restrictions, and it's like, no, you can't plant that.
I wish still would do that.
Yeah.
What about those black birds that swarm around?
That's
in
Grackles.
Those are the Grackles.
Those are
Oh,
the
is that the
Grackles,
Grackles?
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
They scare me sometimes. There's so many.
The birds.
Yeah. I don't know what movie I saw as a kid that had birds in it like that.
Alfred
Yeah.
Hitchcock, the
Yeah,
birds.
the
yeah.
birds.
It must have been, but I don't like it.
He has a hard time in parking lots. He will not walk through the building in daylight. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. Are those native here?
God, you're asking me. So
I guess we're gonna have to have.
You're asking a range specialist about Grackles.
Well,
Ask
she
me
hangs
about
out
grass.
with Elmore.
I do, but I don't
I think
absorb
you're-
a whole lot.
Oh yeah,
birds,
it's like I don't absorb everything Josh says either.
my brain can only handle so many things, and plants are kind of the priority.
Oh my
I don't
gosh. Well, I tell you what, this is a great place to take a break. We will be doing the speed science round after the break here. You are listening to the Red Dirt Agronomy Podcast. While the scientists are brushing up on parking lot ecology, I wanted to remind you that the websites Dr. Laura Goodman talked about are linked from our website, reddirtagronomy.com. And if you have a question for the group, you can send it to us from the website or send us an email directly at podcast@reddirtagronomy.com or drop us a tweet. Our handle is reddirtag on the Twitter sphere. Seems that they have sorted out all of the parking lot ecology that they can do in one session. And now we can move back into the science of rangeland, and we start with a question about carbon sequestration. You are listening to the Red Dirt Agronomy Podcast.
We've heard people say that maybe a way to deal with sequestering up more atmospheric carbon is to plant more trees. And so there's been some research looking at, well, where do these plants store their carbon? And so when you're talking about plants that have trunks and branches and all this stuff, they can hold a lot of carbon because that's all made of carbon. But it's, a majority of it is above ground. And so the problem with that in a state like Oklahoma that is extremely fire adapted is that it's all vulnerable to be burned up and go back into the atmosphere. And so grasses, conversely, they're storing most of their carbon below ground, in the crown of the plant and in the roots. And so if they're burned, there is some release of carbon, but it's a much smaller amount. So some of the research, they've found that about 70% of the carbon in perennial grasses is stored below ground versus above ground, and so that's makes that carbon it's safer from being burned up. And that's really what made the soils of the Great Plains what they are. What made them amazing is all of the organic material that they were contributing to the soil, because there's a huge turnover in perennial grass roots every year. Even though that plant lives for more than 1 year, some of those roots die back, and that's just kept in the soil, and it breaks down in that soil, and that's why we farm a lot of it. It's awesome soil. But yeah, so we don't want people to think that the solution is planting trees everywhere, because it makes me a little bit crazy to watch TV and all of the commercials. It's like toilet paper companies are like, we're planting a tree, and car companies are like, we're planting a tree for every purchase, and like everybody's planting trees, and it's like, y'all stop. Part of our country is supposed to be a prairie, and you need to stop planting trees everywhere. I don't know where they're planting them. They never say that. They just say, we're planting a tree for all the toilet paper you're buying.
What do you know the carbon equivalent rate of like an acre of grassland versus an acre of planted trees, planted timber?
Yeah, so the quantity is still higher in trees just because they're making these huge trunks and branches and stuff. So the quantity, I don't know the number, but the total quantity is greater if you had an acre of trees. But it's vulnerable. So
who was that guy? Did you guys hear that voice? Oh wait, no. Oh, that's Josh.
It's
sorry. Sorry, man. It's the first time. Okay, sorry.
Can't get a word in when we're talking grackles here. So.
Yeah.
Bird identification's not your strong suit. Yeah.
It is not where I hang my hat, sir.
Right.
Well, and that's and like that's to Josh's point. I've in my time here, people ask, well, why don't we just plant everything, let everything go to cedar? From a carbon sequestration standpoint,
and have no
or whatever.
Water.
Well, we don't have any water, and then you just said we won't have any scissor tail. I like the scissor tail; it's kind of a cool bird. I like the with the killdeer. What about a killdeer? Will we have those birds?
Yeah, killdeer are.
Is that how you say it?
Killdeer? Yeah. They actually really killdeer like pretty heavily grazed areas. They really like areas that have had burning and grazing.
Yeah.
What
about cedars?
No.
Yeah.
No. But there's things that affect people too that like cedar trees. So mosquitoes thermoregulate in cedar trees. Ticks, you have more ticks when you have more cedars. So there's a lot of things that we don't like that also like cedars. Pollen, yeah. We get pollen. Did you know that there's pollen we get pollen in like Tulsa from the Texas junipers?
I know.
It's crazy how far that pollen will.
It's
I know,
exhausting.
Texas. Well, like Austin, San Antonio, they know that we're getting pollen from.
Can we sue them?
Austin. Just keep it in Austin.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, but that's like to Josh's points. I mean, we could plant the whole world of trees. We could cover it in solar panels or windmills, but there's some...
there's trade-offs for everything, right?
Exactly.
That's the problem is people get focused on one thing, and it's like the best part about rangelands and the contribution that ranchers are making with their management is that they're keeping that land. They're keeping it what it was, and that's great for lots of wildlife, And so they, if we can help them come up with ways that can deal with the woody plants, but that also make them money, I feel like that's what we've got to do, because we can't expect them to do it when it just costs so much,
Oh yeah. I mean that's just so. I mean, what are you gonna do?
If you go in and have somebody cut cedars off of your property, the old number used to be $100 per acre, but I don't
What's
know
it now, Dave?
Anybody that's paying that.
It's outrageous. It is outrageous. I was fortunate enough to come across a bulldozer and just be able to push them over because the numbers were going to be outrageous for land clearing. We did have a guy come in and shred about 5 acres for us, and it was about $12,000, and just for that one little draw. But we wanted that to rather than have them pushed over or clipped or whatever, we wanted that to be shredded so that way we could actually we wouldn't have erosion problems and all of that down in the draw. So it's serious, but there are programs through the government that help offset some of that cost as well too.
Yeah, for sure. So there's the Natural Resource Conservation Service has a lot of different cost share options, and there's benefits. So they're cost sharing cedar control for pollinators. They're cost sharing cedar control for grassland birds. There's all these other benefits that come along with it, and so even though many times we're clearing it for forage production, it's having other benefits too. And so there's a new one called the Great Plains Grassland Initiative, And with that program, it's a NRCS program. But the idea is that instead of putting a lot of money towards cutting trees where they're very, very, very thick, let's try to find areas in our pasture where we've been able to keep it open and start to maintain those, and then try to grow those areas out. And so we use our resources to manage as many acres as openings versus spending all of our money on the really tight, closed, cedar-infested areas. So, but you brought up a great point on those draws and stuff. If you look underneath a cedar tree near a creek, there's nothing growing there. And those creeks get channelized in no time at all, especially when you get big rainfall events. And so it can really change the whole dynamics of those creeks and whether they're even accessible to animals at all. And yeah, it can become a really big problem with cedars along streams.
Well, and that the erosion side of it has been something that we've been very conscious of is we're trying to eliminate all the cedars that we can and all of the non-hardwood trees that we can, just so that way we can bring back some grasses and graze that. But we don't. Not that we get a lot of rain in Noble County, but from time to time we do get a good gully washer, or I forget the term that Jason used. But we yeah, that's what it was. And so we wanted to not have the banks wash away with it. So that's why we went ahead and went the shredding route.
Yeah.
But it's not cheap. It's not cheap.
Yeah, I know we had done some demonstration sites where we had somebody come in and cut trees, and it was upwards of $400 an acre, and that was, they were huge trees, and he cut them and piled them and everything, but we did some cut stuff where we cut those trees and then stuff them under some other standing trees to then burn through those to carry the fire up into the canopy, but cutting stuff. Hack and squirt, cutting stuff. See, you want to do range stuff. We got lots of cool names.
Well, Josh was a range scientist.
I know. He tells me about stuff.
He's got a fascinating background, if you want to dig into it.
Have you shared that on the podcast?
Not adventure to call it fascinating. So let me ask you. I mean, we talked a lot about cedars, but what as a rangeland specialist, what do you think about things like Old World blue stem and yellow blue stem, King Range blue stem, all those kind of things?
Yeah. So that grass. Oh golly, that grass.
Well, it's native.
Oh no.
To Europe.
To Africa. Yeah. So we have a lot of blue stems. We are blue stem heavy in the Great Plains, and that one is not. So Plains blue stem, Old World blue stem, KR blue stem, King Ranch blue stem, all of the different names that are there's 2 different species and a lot of different common names. So beetles, spar, all of those would fall under this. So those are non-native. They were planted heavily in CRP, then and still planted as forage grasses, and they grow well in low rainfall areas. They're not super palatable for very long. People hay them, and you can get a lot of hay off of those. The problem is they don't stay put, and they invade into other areas pretty quickly, and they're really hard to kill. So at south of Clinton at Clammy, there's a little area there that's 15 acres where they planted. I think it's 32 different accessions or kind of like varieties of Old World blue stem in that area, and then they battled it out, and the ones that were the top dogs made it, and the other ones dropped out. So anyway, we've tried to do some different stuff with ways to control it. The main goal was really to increase diversity because it is in so much CRP in western Oklahoma. How do we get any kind of diversity in there? Because that plant, it loves itself. There's some evidence that there may be some allelopathic chemicals that it's producing where it stops other plants from germinating and growing close to it. So anyway, we've tried different ways of trying to control it, and And there's kind of just a couple options that really work. So you can spray it with glyphosate a couple times, or Roundup, spray it a couple times. You can spray it once with a Mazapir. A Mazapir is a really tough chemical, but it stays active in the soil for 18 months. So nothing else will grow there. Well, Mayor's Tail, let's be honest. Mayor's Tail.
Put it with a little diesel and nothing will grow there for the rest of the time. So
anyway, and then we did some burning in July, which we actually picked that timing because in CRP you can't do any of the mid-contract management practices during nesting. Well, you can't do burning for sure during nesting. So we pushed it, the nesting periods from April through July. So we burned after that, but we ended up killing a bunch of the old world blue stem. And come to find out, somebody had done this in Texas too. And so...
there's something about that really hot fire, or is it just,
wasn't hayed, wasn't grazed before we burned it, so there was a lot of fuel, and it burned hot, and but we've I know some other ranchers that have had that kind of luck with even August burns, so we're trying to figure out what it is that's allowing that to happen in some instances and not in others. But we would love to be able to try, especially where it's invading into native, because our native grasses, they don't care if you burn them in the summer. They come back stronger in many cases. So if we could burn in those areas where we don't want it invading to promote the natives and not the old world blue stem.
I know a couple of years ago when we were getting a lot of old farmland back to grass, it was old farmland that had a problem with old world blue stem. That was a big challenge, is that even where they planted native grasses back to come back, it just won't. The old world blue stem just chokes it out, or just doesn't let it get established.
Yeah, and it changes some of the microorganisms in the soil, so it makes it has a different community that it prefers versus the natives, so that can be one of the issues. And then the natives just take a long time to grow back from seed. They're really tough. So we a lot of times now we'll try to incorporate some species that seed more easily. So Cytodes grama is pretty notorious for seeding easily, but then we're also incorporating a plant called green sprangletop. It's another native, and it'll grow really quickly from seed, but then it kind of falls out after the other grasses get going. So if you've been out to there's a little prairie demonstration out at the Botanic Garden. That's what they did in that mix, and it worked really well. And I know a lot of the seeding companies are now doing that with their natives, because when you just go straight to big blue stem, little blue stem, switchgrass, Indian grass, man, those plants, they there's a little rule of thumb. It's like that they sleep in year 1, they creep in year 2, and they leap in year 3. And so it can take a long time for those native grasses to get going. So you got to put something there that will grow. But so green sprangletop, depending on the soil, Cytodes grama might work too.
If you look on the other side of the state, I know there's a lot of people, especially working with the non-cow, herbivory, wanting to put more like Lespedezas in. Yeah. And you want to comment on that one as well? Because there's some people selling types of Sericea for, I can't remember if it was for goats or sheep or something along that line.
So there's been some research that shows, so Sericea lespedeza is the main one, and that's a non-native too, and it's a legume. We do have some native lespedezas. We have roundhead and slender lespedeza, and those are native, but Sericea lespedeza is not native, and it is another one that will get into all sorts of places that it was not intended to. And that one, there's been research that found that it helps with internal parasite loads with goats, and so people like it, and they like to be, if they can find Sericea hay, they like to feed it to goats. I know folks that raise goats that are like, I've planted Sericea lespedeza 3 times, and I can't get it to grow because my goats keep killing it. And I
just found a new source for income for my in-laws. They got Sericea hay.
Yeah, hay it.
Oh, they do.
Oh, do they?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. They put it on like the Hay Exchange or anywhere on Facebook where there's a goat group. You stick it on there and you'll sell it.
This is fascinating. So I grew up in northeast around Miami, this isn't around my in-laws, but we had a couple of the old guys that managed Sericea like alfalfa.
Yeah.
Phenomenal. But then as
Yeah.
soon as they retired, man, it was bad.
Yeah. Well, cows, so when it's in a pasture that there's lots of other stuff growing, cows will graze it earlier in the year, and then, midsummer they're done. They're done. And it increases in the tannins, those secondary compounds, those tannins. Cattle don't handle tannins like at all. Goats, deer, they can handle a lot. They actually make different proteins in their saliva to start breaking down the tannins before they even swallow it. And then they've got their liver and their kidneys different to handle it. So they have no problem with it. And our goats out at the research station are eating Sericea lespedeza they're eating the stuff that's been burned, but they're also eating the mature big stuff that hasn't been burned. They eat it a lot. So, yeah, and it's great. I mean, it's the reason it's called poor man's alfalfa is that it is really high quality if the animal can handle the tannins. But and so a lot of people hated it. They would hate a lot.
Yeah.
And
2, 3 cuttings, 4 cuttings.
Yeah. But when it's in a mixed pasture and you're only running cattle, it's a tough one. And we had research out here that was run for 18 years, and they looked at the patch burn grazing versus just burning every 3 years. And in the pastures that were just burnt the whole pasture every 3 years, the Sericea was up to 19-20% of the pastures covered.
It seems like there was this pasture when I used to work out there at the range station that they'd burn yearly, and it seemed like that whole meadow was just covered with Sericea because before the new grasses got a chance to establish, that Sericea was just coming up and running wild over it.
Yeah, it tends the Sericea will increase regardless of whether you're burning or not, but especially the dormant season burns seem to benefit it. With the patch burn grazing, we've been able to keep it at a lower level, so it's at 8% in the patch burn pastures, and we've done no herbicide spraying in those pastures, and that's been over 18 years that it's kind of maintained that level. And so now that we have the goats in addition, it'll be fun to see what happens if we can start to actually see a downward trend in the amount of Sericea.
If someone were to take over a pasture that had a lot of Sericea and they wanted to get it out, they wanted to move it, herbicide's the best option?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. So there's methylfuran methyl so it used to be Remedy was kind of the go-to, and you'd do that. You'd spray it during earlier in the year, but now methylfuran methyl, that's in like Ally or Escort. That is a chemical that's really effective at controlling it. And you do it later in the year, like August, September. It just depends on the plant a little bit. But we apply that. It's much cheaper, really, really, really cheap. You get excellent control with it, and tend to not have as much kill on like all the other plants we don't want to hurt, because there's lots of broadleaf plants that we'd prefer to keep. And so that later application, almost all of those have kind of already flowered. They're kind of done. And so that works really well. So methylfuran methyl is that chemical. And it works great. Yeah, if that's your, otherwise you can try goats or you can try patch burn grazing, depending on what you're wanting to do. Yeah, that's a plant. Actually, it was even planted in food plots for wildlife. And for quail, they even planted it. And then they found out, so the quail were eating a lot of it, but they found out that they couldn't hardly break it down. The seed coat was too hard, so they were filling up on it, and then they were just doing really poorly. So it has this, it's a legume with this really hard seed coat. And they've done some studies to look at how long it's viable in the soil, and I think it's like 20 or 30 years that it's viable. And it produces thousands and thousands of seeds. So long-term management matters.
Yeah.
So kind of taking a right turn, we talked all spring about how far behind some of the native pastures were. It was a little cooler and it was dry and all that. So now that we have, at least for parts of the state, we have been getting a little bit moisture, and we're definitely not cooler anymore. So are we going to see that turn around, or is there any impacts you think that the spring leading up to it, that later green up, is going to have on these native pastures, or are we just going to end up catching up by the end of it?
So, almost, so like 90% of our plant growth in our pastures happens from mid-April through August. It's like 75% of it's done by the end of July. So we did miss a bit in April. So there's a new tool called the GrassCast, which is a forage forecaster. They only have the western part of the state in it, but it's run out of the Drought Mitigation Center in Nebraska. Anyway, so the GrassCast is showing that there's going to be some parts of southwest Oklahoma, and then in the Panhandle, like for sure Texas County, is going to be dry. Even if we get normal rainfall, they'll still be dry. If we get above normal, it's predicting that they might get normal growth. But if it's normal rainfall from here on out, they're going to be like 15 to 30% below average production. And so that reduction in forage production would be directly the reduction in cattle, the livestock weight that it could support. So
you get to Texas County.
If
Beaver County's green, Texas County's brown.
Yeah.
I didn't go out to Cimarron County, but it's like there's nothing growing outside of a couple wheat fields that are about to die and the irrigated stuff. It's bad.
It's bad.
Usually, even back in, our prior droughts since I've been here, it greened up a little bit in spring. Nothing. It went from cold to hot.
Yeah.
With no rain.
Yeah. Yes. That's crazy. Well, I think one of the issues for folks when we do get into a drought is like, okay, I'm in a drought, but like how much drier am I going to be versus normal? And so the GrassCast is useful for that because it'll give you an estimate of how much above or below normal production you'll be. And so it'll give you kind of an idea of how much you should modify that stocking rate.
Do you know where that was? Like, I know it's up in Nebraska, but I was on a project years ago where they were, I think Tyson Auctioner was involved in trying to do some of that with some folks from OU. Is that a product from this part of the world, or is that something those guys up there have developed? Do you know?
I think it was developed out of one of the ARS stations. I thought it was maybe the ARS station in Wyoming or Colorado that had worked on doing that. I mean, they're using some, different models and stuff as well. And then BLM and NRCS data that's been collected on the ground. But I don't know.
It's pretty nice if it works anywhere at all. Or at all.
So you can check. So it's updated every 2 weeks, and you can zoom in to a 6 by 6 mile grid. So like they originally only had it at the county level, and now it's you can zoom in even more, which is great. And then like I said, it updates every couple weeks, so you can check back in and see what. I recommend that folks check on that, especially in like May, June. By July, you need to be thinking about what you're stocking, if you're going to need to change some stocking rates and what those changes are going to be. Because by then we kind of know, we have a pretty good idea what's, if it's going to be really bad.
Yeah.
I mean, we know earlier than that, but at that point we know how much.
You're done. You're not going to get any more growth.
Exactly.
The margin, the return on the rainfall's going to get pretty low then.
Yeah, because if we get a bunch of rain, I mean, we a lot of the state, we kind of have this bimodal, like 2 times in the year where we get a lot of rain, right? We get a bunch of rain in most of the state in May and June, and then August, September-ish, there's another little bump. But by then, our grasses have already headed out. And if they've headed out, they're done. They're done growing biomass. They're done growing leaves and forage. So they don't, even if we got just dumped on at that point, we're not going to get much out of it.
And that's actually one of the reasons why Oklahoma, the Southern Great Plains, have been perfect for grasses since the beginning of time. I mean, because it's because of the rainfall, because of the soil quality, and all of that. One thing Brian was talking about on the break was the soil, how it has changed acidic levels from eastern Oklahoma out west, and how grasses have played a role in that too.
Well, so I was just saying that in eastern Oklahoma we have native acidity because of the rainfall, leaching, and the production systems, or not the production, because of the soil formation factors, lime being some granite and some other things out there. But in the western part of the state, our acidity is anthropogenic, meaning it was created by humans. It's the farming practices that's acidified the soils. This, where we're at right now, Stillwater, you can find high 4s, low 5s. Before the ground was broken out, it was 6.5 to 7. It's been our system.
And some of that works better with what was here back then, the grasses back before the prairie got broken by the land. And there's actually a couple of places around Stillwater that have never been plow broken, right? Up there by the airport, the OSU land. I was thinking Randy Raper told me about that one time.
I don't know.
There's like
It
2 or
might
3
be
spots.
a couple square feet.
There's
Jason.
supposed to be some unbroken ground just west of I-35 out by the old cemetery. There's an old cemetery out there.
I mean, Randy would know more.
Yeah, they pulled when they were sampling from Magruder because it fits the Renfro or the Norge, I guess it'd be.
There's very few acres of ground in this state that have. I mean, Oklahoma has 45 million total acres of land, right? Is that about right? That's the number I always run with.
Sure.
And
sounds right.
That we've had the most we've ever had under cultivation was 20 million. So half of the surface of the state of Oklahoma has been cultivated at one time, and that wouldn't have necessarily all been. I mean, you had some cycles back 100 years ago where they're slash and burn type agriculture, where they would farm for a few years and abandon that, and then farm some more. But they always had 20 million acres running up until 1930. So most of the soil in Payne County, most of it was cultivated. I've seen very few soils in my career that have not been cultivated in the state.
Yeah, in Payne County, I mean, most of the pastures I go out on there's terraces. I mean, it's pretty obvious.
Yeah. I mean, like Laura said earlier, if it was so rough that you couldn't get a tractor up it or a team of mules, then it's not been cultivated. But if you could get a team of mules on it or a tractor, it's probably been cultivated. Because they didn't know any. I mean, how would you know? You come out here and you have black soil. Like, we're known as red dirt, right?
Yeah.
But 100 years ago, it was pretty freaking black soil.
6% organic matter and...
and they thought they were in Iowa, right? Maybe even better because they didn't have to drain everything.
That's true.
But then when they plowed it up, and it rained real hard, then it all washed into the creek, and it was kind of but that's what the range people are dealing with now. There's a lot of eroded soils.
Yeah.
So really the number one takeaway for me, and I'm sure other people have different ones here, but the goats are the new prescribed burn whenever it comes to land management.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we got to give people as many options as possible.
Yeah.
Yep. And I think there's some locations that it's going to be tough for people to get burns done, and so I think goats are a great option. There's going to have to be some type of mechanical control, and that the goats can't reach everything. So the good thing is if you cut an elm and it resprouts, a goat loves it. If you cut a hackberry and it resprouts, a goat loves it. So there's just options there, and with the 5-year average being $2.80 a pound for 40 to 60 pound kids, I think there's some incentive there, regardless of whether they do anything for your pasture. Quite frankly, so
you said this last year you averaged twins or better.
We had like 1.5 babies per nanny, but that was their first kid crop. So I think this one will likely be even better, and we're gonna keep track of the economics of it as it goes along. We did have Daryl Peel do some long-term economic analyses, And he said the one that had a long-term positive net return was the mixed species with nanny goats or does, reproductive goats basically, and cattle and burning. So that was the one that was profitable.
One of the, and I should have asked this earlier, but one of the technologies that's out there is these wireless fencing.
Oh yeah, the virtual fence.
And there's some projects going on between NREM and Animal Science and collaborations, I'm sure. And a lot of what you would think is it'd be kind of expensive, I suppose. But relative to building the fence required to keep goats in, do you think that's an option? Or at least something a guy could look at as these virtual fences for the goats instead of spending all this money on 10 wires of fences?
Yeah. Well, I think so. I think in the future that's definitely going to be an option. Right now they're mainly targeting cattlemen, but I don't know that that'll always be the case. So I don't know that they have a small ruminant collar available. The company that we're working with on our research is called Vents. But yeah, I actually have been asked about that quite a bit, talking about this goat stuff. Is like, hey, do they have virtual fence collars for goats? And yeah, I think there's definitely opportunity for that. And then the other benefit of the virtual fence is you can change where you want them to be or don't want them to be. So you could really target their use on certain vegetation if you didn't want it.
Yeah.
Which would be fantastic.
Because does it respond very well from electric wire? Or
yes.
So you could put electric wire out too. How many strands of that would you need? 5?
I mean, I wouldn't use it I wouldn't use only that for the perimeter fence. A lot of times folks will add, if they had 5-strand barbed wire, they'd add 2 strands of electric. Some people like to be a little riskier and do less, but 2 has worked for a lot of folks. If you were just gonna put them out there, I don't know how many. There's a lot of people that are doing rotational grazing with small ruminants that are using electric fence, and then there's also the net electric fence. But that I've used that. It's fine if you can get stuff stuck in the dirt really easily. Yeah. It's not fine if you've got a lot of rocks and stuff and things to ground.
Well, what if I was just interested in cleaning up my pastures? I really didn't want to have to jack with rounding these freaking goats up. Could I get some and throw them out there? How long do you think they would last?
Jason is asking all all of my questions because these are the ones that I'm going through right now. Of
course, I guess if you're paying $200 a freaking head, you probably want to try to get one back, but. If the benefit, how long do you think they would live in the wild? Would they not live very long? I know that's a dumb question.
How long before they go feral? Yeah.
Well, I don't.
They wouldn't stay around. They would run off or get killed by something.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. There's lots of things that want to eat a goat.
Oh. They're not like wild pigs.
They're not that tough, no. It's better if you had.
Why are beneficial things not tough?
Well, they're tough. They're tough in their own ways. Like they can go longer without water. They can go further from water. They can they climb on much rougher terrain. A cow doesn't want to use anything over a 10% slope in most cases unless you give it some serious incentive. And a goat, it's like, bring it on. I'll 60% slope. What? Oh yeah, I'll go up that. Yeah. They don't care. So there's trade-offs, but they are killed by a lot more things than a cow. But that's why if you stuck a guard dog with them, they'd last for a while. But I don't know. Without good fencing, I don't know where they'd go. There's no telling.
You'd probably get shot or something.
But the guard dogs are amazing. Legitimately amazing.
I'm tired of that goat coming on my backyard. I'm going to go shoot it. Yeah.
Eats their rose bushes or something.
Eats my rose bushes.
But the guard dogs, they won't keep them in proximity. You can't train them to keep them.
They're not herders.
No.
You need to put a fence up.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get away from this thing. Do you know how much? I'm not going to quote numbers, but it's unreal how much just a 5-wire barbed wire T-post fence costs.
Yes.
And you're talking about doubling it. Probably.
Yeah. Well, maybe in a year or two I can come back on and I can tell you what we find as far as how long it takes for us to pay off our fence. I'd love to see how long it would take to pay off different types of fence because our fence is kind of we called it the Trump wall for a while because it's like
it's
not turtle friendly. I'll say that. Like it's the crazy fence, but
Really?
yeah. I mean, it's just you
turtles
can't.
don't cross the fence.
No.
I don't know if I've ever judged a fence on turtle friendly.
Well, there's lots of different research going on these pastures. So we have to.
When
think
you see
about
a line of dead turtles trying to escape,
Yeah.
Oh,
It
we're
leaves
just
an
messing
You
up
have
there.
a turtle. You have a graduate student out there counting turtles, don't you?
Well, I don't.
Someone does. Though,
There was
don't they?
GPS units on turtles. I bet I don't. But yeah. Well,
have to have a
I mean,
turtle
our turtles are struggling. At
Are
least
they?
we've got ornate box turtles and the three-toed turtle. We have some turtles. So there's.
you're telling me I need to stop aiming for them on the road?
Brian.
Brian, how old are you?
How are you going to know
16?
what's going to happen
Turtle
with the
hater.
weather if you don't let the turtles walk around?
Yeah.
Exactly. He knows it.
You have to watch. They're
You
better than our weather folks down in.
No doubt.
So we're running out of turtles and we're running out of scissortail flycatchers.
Yep.
What is this world coming to?
Lots of grackles.
And calorie pair.
It's crazy.
Pear trees and grackles.
Yeah.
So Laura, one more time, tell us about your project that you're working on,
Yes,
and when does it wrap up?
Yeah, so it's the Prairie Project. It's a 5-year grant. I can't do math. It started in 2019, so 2024.
Okay.
And the webpage is theprairieproject.org. On social media, we're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and it's called Prairie Restored. And then our Oklahoma State Extension for Natural Resources is on all those platforms as well, and that's Oklahoma Lands. And so if you want to see what we're doing, that's what we're doing. And we also share lots of information on land management there. So depending on what your goals are, grazing, wildlife, whatever, we've got lots of info available.
Tons of great infographics. I love the infographics they put up.
Thanks.
Dr. Laura Goodman, thank you so much for coming in and putting up with us for an hour and a half. And,
No worries, this is fun.
and answering questions about birds and turtles and
Things I don't know much
goats
about.
and yeah.
You know more than me.
We're just going to let that slide.
We're just going to let it go. Yeah, we're just going to let it go. Thank you for listening in on this conversation on the Red Dirt Agronomy Podcast. And if you would like to join the conversation, send us an email, podcast@reddirtagronomy.com, or send us a tweet. Our handle is reddirtag. We would like to thank Dr. Laura Goodman for joining us on the podcast today. And to find out more about her or any of our guests, along with any of the resources that we talked about today on the podcast, visit reddirtagronomy.com. There you will find show notes and you can listen to past episodes as well. For Dr. Josh Lofton, Dr. Jason Warren, Dr. Brian Arnell, I am the not a doctor, but I play one on a podcast, Dave Deacon, and we want to thank you for listening. The proceeding is a copyrighted recording of Ag Now Media, LLC, 2022. And yes, all rights are reserved.